welcome to the fifth part of series 3. This episode I'm going to talk about manifestation, the various ways in which manifestation happens and the contributing factors to it that you might be interested in considering along the way. This is a blank slate because essentially that's what we have to deal with here. We have to deal with a blank slate of reality at any given moment in time, from which we help to create or deal with whatever reality manifests next. So, as we're familiar with the atom, I'm going to put the atom at the centre of this little drawing here. So, let's give it the classic kind of look that we're used to seeing. You can't see that very well. Let's try something a bit chunkier. So, what you're used to seeing here is the swirling electrons zipping around the nucleus of the atom, vaguely like this, if you consider the fact that there are two halves to the nucleus. There is the proton and the neutron. The neutron is neutral, and the proton is positively charged, so we give it a positive sign. And the electrons zipping around the outside are negatively charged. So that's the construct of the atom in basic brief terms, as we would know it from Rutherford's diagram and the generally accepted view of how atoms are constructed. But that's a starting point. The rest of it is going to populate this board, and we'll see where manifestation goes. Well, hello! Welcome to this world, this version of my existence. And here today I'm going to look at the many worlds we live in and see if we can unravel some of the deeper waters. The options that we have as far as scientific evidence is concerned at the moment are many and varied. On the one hand, when you look at uncertainty and cause and effect and order and chaos, but then the duality that comes into play with regards to wave particle, and we don't really understand how we operate within it, how we live in it, what to do with it, and what would it matter even if we did know or didn't know.
Are we the only species that thinks about these things?
It's quite likely that we're the only species on the planet who is adept enough and driven enough to investigate the recesses of the quantum world and the physics of what happens in reality. Other creatures more than likely totally take for granted whatever they know, whatever they don't, how they feel, how they don't feel, and are very much less complicated as a result in their thought processes and the way they operate. So that gives us a bit of a key responsibility. A responsibility on the one hand to be able to decipher the information that we're so driven to unravel, and the responsibility also to be able to handle that power. They say knowledge is power. Well, yeah, there are lots of different versions of power, though, and each version of power has its own merits and its own drawbacks. It has its own highs and it has its own falls. Dare I mention the M word? No, maybe not. With the many permutations of the world that we live in available to us at any given time, it's not surprising really that we can, at the drop of a hat, change our trajectory in some way. We can improve things simply by taking a different approach. looking at things in a different way, adopting a different attitude, changing a habit. That's a big one. Changing habits. Oh, yeah, necessary. Change is inevitable, and therefore, to my mind, being very judgmental in this statement, it needs to be embraced. Technology to me is something of an anathema. I don't really like its advance. I don't enjoy the world of upgrades, even though psychologically I think we're very overdue for one. Now, in my reality, my one of many worlds, I have an owl. He lives with me because he's blind. He's very happy to live with me because he gets well looked after and well fed. And he's a very affectionate bird. So I'm very lucky because he's got such a lovely nature that he's able to live here happily as a blind owl. The things that we don't control essentially are the things that come in as a result of some kind of external factor. There are lots of permutations in everybody's world of what goes on. When the waveform collapses into a particle format, represented by this atom, that is what we experience of reality, literally. It's hard, it's particle, it's all atoms, it's made of stuff. But science, physics in particular, quantum mechanics even in particular beyond that, is deciding very rapidly that reality really isn't all it's cracked up to be. The fact is that we live in this stuff ourselves, and what we do with it really is rather important. I've introduced language in here, vague representation of some symbols that you might recognise as various signs that represent various things to various people. There is nothing more pleasurable and invigorating than the sound of somebody laughing when you know they've had a really hard day, or the gurgle of the first word of a small child.
Especially if it's your own.
We understand and we respond to, we correspondingly relate to each other's sounds. The particle that is related most closely to sound is called a phonon. A phonon is very much like the sound version of light, music and light, and we haven't really quite cracked the code of that one yet. So determined are we to be enmeshed in constants and put constraints on things in order to be able to measure the data,
That we really do have a record of losing sight of the bigger picture.
Let's extrapolate this. There's a cosmos out there, and there's a quantum world beneath the levels of reality about which we know very little, but we do have an idea of what the components of it are. It would be very odd, I think, if solar systems, for instance, were not mobile structures. That being the case, surely it's very likely that Mars once existed in the Goldilocks zone and has now moved on out of it and beyond it, and that Venus is about to move in, intergalactic terms. It's not tomorrow; it's a long way off. But Venus is next to move in to the Goldilocks zone that we now currently occupy. Yay! This is the zone where life support is possible. Consciousness can flourish in this zone, in this way, because it is exactly right. It's
neither too hot nor too cold nor too lumpy with asteroids. It's perfect. This is the Goldilocks zone, and this is where we live.
I do have a reason to believe that there are consciousnesses and entities beyond our own, i.e., who have more capability because they can cross dimensions, they can cross the dimensional divide They can communicate with consciousnesses in this dimension. And I'm talking first-hand experience here. I'm not talking by proxy or hearsay or reading books. I'm talking first-hand experience. I know for a fact that entities and consciousnesses cross the dimensional divide. And chuck it in the woo bin if you want to. Woof, room 101 for quantum mechanics. Fine, don't mind. This is the variation of worlds that we have to live in.
Language is all at the moment we have to work with.
Anyway, just to wrap up, polarities, frequencies, resonance, language, the atom.
Our first port of call, really.
Look after yourselves, because ultimately you are a singularity and only you can look after your own singularity. Love you loads, and I'll see you soon. Take care. Have fun. Bye.